Hey guys, welcome to my Obscuros Spriting, actually pixel art in general, mini sprites tutorial. Let's just call it that. Alright, so first things first, the program I use is Pisco. It has a web page version, which I'm currently using, as well as a downloadable executable version, which is also convenient. Now, the wonderful people at Obscuros gave me a zip file of all the mini sprites I'll ever need, so I'm good on that part. But if you need to find mini sprites, you can look on, I think, PokemonDB.net has all of the mini sprites for Gen 7 to 8. The rest you may need to find on Cerebi or the Dragonfly Cave. Because of the aforementioned zip file, all I usually have to do is find which Pokemon I'm gonna sprite, look up their dex number, and then type that into the folder to find my mini sprite that I'll use as the base of my project. So for this, we're going to sprite Forest Glalie, which is a texture that Obscuros has. Forest Glalie is a cool texture that is also very simple, so I could just put that on the sprite, add some details, and make it really pop. Before we start, make sure your canvas is at 32 by 32 pixels. This is so that you can make sure your sprite is at the right place and it looks about the right size. Alright, here's the Glalie sprite. We'll be recoloring this sprite for the rest of this guide. In this case, white is the highlight color and the grayish color you see is a shade color. The color you pick for your highlight/shade will depend on the reflectiveness of your texture. So first, you have to look at your sprite. I'll put up a pop-up of Forest Glalie. And then look at what you're using to base the sprite off of. So as you can see, I got some sort of brownish color. I might change this as I go, so don't think this is final. If you're following step by step, I mean, you can, but I don't advise it. Try it out on some other sprites, the concepts are the same. Use the Replace Color tool, highlighted by that yellow box, and select a color that matches the one in your texture. We're going to first pick out a highlight. Remember, highlights have to be a bit lighter than the shadow. But that's not all there is to highlights and shadows. Make sure the colors look similar. Do not pick a wildly different tint or hue. Too bright, this is wood. Here's our highlighted wood color. And that's all we need because, again, wood isn't very reflective. So first things first, you want to color your main body, the biggest surface area, because that's just gonna make the rest of the work a lot easier. What you see here is a couple moves with the Replace All Colors bucket. And then I believe I transition onto coloring the horns with the normal paint bucket and the pencil tool. I drew in some outlines for the horns because it touches the body and I want to separate it from the body. You don't want it to look like a jumbled mess. We added in a highlight. But I did this before I realized the actual texture doesn't really have much of highlights. It just has a darker spot where the highlights normally are. So I just added some darkness to that. Look at your sprite, make sure it looks accurate. But focus on details later. Your primary objective is recoloring. I colored in the eyes using the same color palette as the horns. And bingo! There. If you submit that as a sprite, I think you'll get accepted. That looks perfectly fine. Really. If you just do that, that's all you need to do. You can pump out a bunch of sprites using this method. So here I'm just adding more detail. You don't need to do this. As a beginner, all you should focus on is improvement and learning. So as you may notice, while adding details to the spots, I do a little bit of dithering. Dithering is going in a zigzag pattern with the pixels. Dithering is a form of shading, so use this in areas that are darker. If they are extremely dark, you could straight up just color in some of the lighter dither. Your highlights, even. If they are in an area where there's a mid-tone, that's where you should dither the most. For lighter areas, the same thing as the darker ones, you just replace some shade colors with the highlights. Do note, however, that dithering is a bit complicated and you could easily mess up your sprite if you dither wrong. So if you're just beginning the sprite, you might want to just not do it unless it's super necessary. Like right now, you see, the lighter the area gets, the less dithering I'm doing. In fact, I'm erasing some of my previous dithering because it's a light area. Actually, if I were to redo this sprite, I would actually remove the dithering from the left of the horns too. The left of the horn. That is in a light area. Figure out where the light is coming from and figure out where the shadow is. Like, if you need to, draw a little sun thing to the top left of your sprite. That's where the light's coming from. Alright, so if you submit this as your sprite submission, you'll definitely get accepted. This is pretty nice. Here I am just coloring the detail a little bit similar to the original sprite. Detailing comes last. Make sure you have a main body recolored before you start working on details. That's an issue a lot of people have. I'm just re-adding the mouth. Right? So now this looks pretty much complete, but if you want to be extra, again, you're a beginner, you shouldn't really be too extra because then you lose sight of what's important. I'm looking at the sprite for Onyx to look at how I should do the wood chips, or whatever the pattern on Glalie. I decided that I was just going to use a darker color to carve out sections of Glalie's body to give the illusions of rocks, scales, things sticking out, basically. It carved out sections of the body. The shading goes around those rigid parts. This gives emphasis on the rockiness and just how hard Onyx is, I guess. Here I am, looking at more Onyx sprites. This is a part of spriting. This is a big part of spriting. Look at what sprites already have. Here I am, carving out sections of Glalie. This is specific to something like the rocky-ish texture or woodish, I guess. And again, don't do this if you're just beginning. You could just submit whatever you get from the previous step. Control Z will be a very helpful tool in spriting. You'll make a lot of mistakes, as humans naturally tend to do. And if you want to erase it, boom, Control Z. There, all of your mistakes, gone. Well, for one step at least. You could also get into a situation where you kind of get stuck between Control Z's. You Control Z something, you want to look back at a previous sprite, and you accidentally make one change and boom, you can't go back anymore. Be careful of that. Here I am, adding a bit of shading to the parts that I added to Glalie. This helps the parts pop out. Right, so you see it looks like there are flakes on Glalie's head, or like Glalie's head has cracks, something like that. Here's a key point. More detail does not necessarily mean better details. If it gets to a point where your sprite looks cluttered when minimized, that's the point of a mini sprite, then you need to take a look back and see what you could fix. Alright, as you can see here, the finished sprite has a lot of detail. but I think it's working out pretty nicely. The rough and rocky woodish texture is looking right, and it's drawing attention to the eyes because the eyes don't have as much detail. By the way, huge props to whoever makes textures in Obscuros. Those look fantastic. No, seriously, they look really good. And alright, I think this is our final composition. Yeah. Now that we're finally done, here are some key points in this guide. Don't go all in on the details. Make sure your base sprite's recolor looks good first. To do this, we picked out some fitting colors that represented the texture. We figured out highlights, shadows, and where the light was coming from. We successfully replaced all the colors in the palette. And then we moved on to the details. Dithering is a form of shading. When you're beginning, don't use dithering everywhere. Use it when it's important. Dithering is a great way to blend two colors together. Looking at other Pokemon is a great way to get an idea of what your sprites should look like. Also, I didn't really talk about this in the guide, but make sure your outline is going to be somewhat darker than your body. Or at least it has a high contrast to your body. I was originally planning on doing a bunch of sprites, but I feel like this Glalie sprite actually summed up basically everything you need to know. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or look in the description for my Discord username and pin. Type that in, friend me, and we can have a chat on Discord. You can also join a community that I'm part of. Yeah. That sums up that. Tell me how your spriting went. And show me some in Discord direct messages. I also have in the description below a link to Obscuros and Discord server if you guys want to join. Okay, have a good day everyone. I wish you luck on your spriting adventures.